Good morning, everyone. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Supervisor Brandow.
Here.
Supervisor Magzig.
Here.
Supervisor Mendez.
Here.
Supervisor Pacheco.
Here.
Chairman Quintero.
Here.
All five present. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd just like to ask that we be reminded that today's a day of remembrance, 9/11, and today we ask that you keep the fallen heroes in our thoughts and recognize the day. Welcome to the Monday, September 11th, 2023 budget hearings of the Fresno County Board of Supervisors. We'll begin today's meeting with the invocation and flag salute. The invocation will be led by District 1 Supervisor Brian Pacheco. And after the invocation, please remain standing for the flag salute.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, Nathan Maxig is doing that for us today.
Wow.
So please rise for the invocation. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that we can gather together today, and we thank you for the incredible work that the men and women of Fresno County do day in and day out to provide services to the residents who live here. I too pray right now for those families who lost loved ones on September 11th, even though it happened 22 years ago. That pain and suffering stays with family members for a lifetime. But dear Lord, you are the great healer, you are the great provider, and I pray that we always seek your wisdom and will in all things. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin, I would like to outline how today's hearings will proceed. After each item is heard, I will ask for comments from the board and the public. When we get to item number 8, I will ask for one motion from the board to approve the budgets as presented. If there are no concerns from my colleagues, Madam Clerk, do we have any concerns or comments from the board? Okay. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
We now open the public hearings on fiscal year 2023-24 recommended budgets. Item number 1, County Administrative Office presentation of the fiscal year 23-24 recommended budgets.
I will now turn this over to our County Administrative Officer, Mr. Nerlin, who will present the fiscal year 2023-2024. Mr. Nerlin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. Paul Nerland, your CAO, and want to welcome you to the 23-24 budget hearings. We'll have a brief presentation before we get into the details of the budget itself. As we consider the budget process, I want to take a moment and just remind ourselves why we're here and what we're all about. And our vision is working together for a quality of life for all in Fresno County. We have a diverse population of over 1 million people spread over 6,000 square miles, whether they live in one of our 15 incorporated cities, whether they live in rural or farmland, foothills or mountains. Sometimes my kids ask, what do you do at the county? And it's amazing what we do, trying to work together for a quality life for everyone that lives in this community. Our mission remains the same, to provide excellent public services to our diverse community. Our county is made up of residents who care for this community, and so people who work in this county tend to live in this county where our family lives. And so we have a vested interest in making sure that the services that we deliver are excellent, because they're talking about people we love and our own families as well. Before we get into the actual 23-24 budget, I just wanted to take a brief moment, with your indulgence, to look back over the prior year. A year ago, when I addressed you for the 21-22 budget, looking back, we called it a year of transition. But this year, I think you would agree that the 22-23 fiscal year was really a year of resilience. And to say that the county weathered the storm, both literally and figuratively, would not be an exaggeration. And so just a few things, a few highlights from 22 and 23. And there's so many things that could be talked about, but I just want to mention a few. obviously, you'll notice a theme on the budget book and in the budget presentation of water. And I can't say enough about the Flood Response Operations Group, or as we became known, the FROG, and the team that was behind responding to the storms last year. As you may recall, I signed a proclamation of emergency on both January 9th and March 2nd. On January 10th, we had heavy rains, several atmospheric rivers that hit Fresno County, causing flooding, mudslides, and washouts. On February 23rd, the county experienced record snowfall, and the warm rain that came after, we were concerned that the nearly 8 million acre-feet of snow would overburden our water systems. I can't say enough about the Emergency Operations Center and just the team, not just the county, but our partners like CAL FIRE and others that came together and coordinated in a way that I've never seen before. I am so proud of the efforts of this group. I'm so proud of the FROG, or the Flood Operations Group. I would argue that those of us that worked together during this emergency built our own relationship, but it was the kind of thing where everybody was ready to respond at a moment's notice. And the teamwork, collaboration, communication, and hard work really saved lives. Some of the team that you see in the video here, everything from GIS to the drones that were constantly up checking what was happening real time. The public information officer, the communication, the special website that was created called FresnoCountyEmergency.com that had all information in one place. Can't say enough about Terry Maharado and her leadership as well over this team. It was really an amazing effort, and I can't say enough about this team and just what they did in responding to this emergency in 22-23. And of course, we're still in the recovery efforts for that. When we talk about the American Rescue Plan, there's been a lot of work done that this community and this county can be proud of. The county and your board authorized funding transformational projects, from parks to water and sewer infrastructure to community organizations that assist children, the elderly, and other vulnerable populations, distribution of food, the launch of a groundbreaking rural mobile health program, offering medical services to farm workers in rural areas, a new community resource center for the Marjorie Mason Center. We could go on. I will highlight, we'll talk about our annual report in just a moment, but there's $68 million of projects that are highlighted in a map across the county, just showing some of the amazing work that's been done. I want to highlight some of the work that goes into assisting the unhoused in our community. $6.5 million in dedicated ARPA funding with specific initiatives helping the unhoused was authorized by your board. Our Department of Behavioral Health, in collaboration with the Fresno Housing Authority, added 117 units of permanent supportive housing this year at Butterfly Gardens in Clovis, Allegra Commons in Fresno. The county funds the Multi-Agency Access Point, or MAP program, to assist those in the county who need to get access to services. The recommended budget we'll speak about in a moment also adds a position to help coordinate these services to ensure that they are effective. We have an award-winning team here at Fresno County, and for fear of leaving someone out, I will not list the awards and recognition received by county employees and county teams over the course of the last year. But I would encourage you and all of our employees and the public to look at our annual report. The county and our employees received local, state, and national recognition for their excellent work. And for employees who are listening to this, reason to be proud. And we probably don't celebrate enough just the many awards that we've received. And I want to thank the employees and our team for doing that. And I just want to end by again talking about the county's renewed commitment to better tell our story, whether that be on social media or whether that be the videos that we put out. There's so many different things that we're doing. One of those things is the annual report. And so included in your budget book is the second annual report, celebrating all the accomplishments over the last fiscal year. Every department has a section. It also educates the public about our county services. So again, for employees and the public listening to this, we strongly encourage you, read that report. There's a lot of things to learn, but also to celebrate, and it's certainly a source of pride for the county. As you take a look at that report, there's some new sections talking about water and the impact, but also want to point out on the format, this insert talks about some of the ARPA funding that we were just speaking to, but there's a new section here where if you scan a QR code, there's actual videos that go along with each page. And so if you want to learn more and see videos about what's featured in the report, use your phone, scan the QR code, and you could actually see more information about what's going on in Fresno County. I just want to applaud our communications team again. I feel like the bar has been raised, in particular with Sonia Dosti and Joshua Dean, that we've gotten so used to the quality of the good work that we're doing that we expect even more. And I would say that they brought it. I'll give you some examples. Our reach on Facebook has increased 500%. Our reach on Instagram by over 1,000%, and we've increased to over 15,000 employees. Some of the videos that you've seen, and yes, that is Supervisor Magsig on a bike on one of those videos, it reaches all parts of our community. It highlights what we do. It brings pride to the organization, and I'm just so proud of the efforts that have taken place with our communication team. I would also say that it involves engaging our employees, and so some of the videos are specifically to our employees. And the other thing I would mention is the fact that we just completed an employee engagement survey, and we're in the process of doing that, but that's a critical piece of our strategy here at the county. So many things to celebrate. That's a look back at the last year, and I think we can look back with pride at many things accomplished and many things that were overcome in 22-23. As we talk about the recommended budget for fiscal year 23-24, I just want to remind you about the process. The budget process began with instructions to all departments in the first quarter of this year. There were budget workshops back in March, hours and hours of preparation and work over the summer working through this robust process. The recommended budget was released a couple of weeks ago, as you know, and we briefed with you individually, received many questions and comments. As your CAO, my job is to present a recommended budget that matches your priorities, is sustainable, but also adheres to certain guiding principles to help us in the decision-making process. And so as we talk about those guiding principles again and what they represent, these are not new. We've been talking about these before I was your CAO, but we are sticking to them, and I would argue they're probably more important now than they've ever been. We need to make sure that the revenues that we are projecting are realistic and achievable. You'll hear a theme in this presentation that the revenue estimates that we have put in this budget are conservative, and they're conservative for a reason. We want to budget discretionary revenues conservatively, but also adhere to that net county cost target. And Paige will elaborate further on that later in this presentation. And if we have one-time revenue carry over from the prior year or other one-time purposes, we use that for one-time projects, whether that be capital projects, reserves. We never use one-time funding, or it's not recommended for funding ongoing services. And so these are some of the guiding principles that we have stuck to and we continue to stick to as we look at this recommended budget for 23-24. As we take a look at the positions that are included in the recommended budget for this year, the 23-24 recommended budget only adds a modest net gain of 12 positions, which brings our position total to 8,412. I would add that this is the lowest number of net additions in at least a decade. It's a small number. And this conservative approach was at my direction. I want to thank departments who made adjustments, and so sometimes you'll notice they may have added positions but deleted vacant positions, and this is going along with that conservative approach as we look forward to the future. There's a number of things that we'll talk through with the budget itself, but at this point I'm going to hand it over to Paige Benavidez, who is our interim budget director, to get into the detail of the recommended budget itself.
Good morning, Board. Paige Benavidez, County Administrative Office. The fiscal year 23-24 recommended budget is, as you can see on the screen, $4.838 billion in total. And of that amount, $2.367 billion is for the general fund, or the county's primary operating fund. As shown, a large portion, or about $2.1 billion of the general fund, is for human services and for justice services. And the increase in the general fund of $181 million from fiscal year 22-23 is largely due to significant increases in these types of services. The increase in human services is primarily due to estimated increases for the Department of Behavioral Health in contracted services that result from the conversion to a fee-for-service structure under the state plans to reform Medi-Cal, or Cal-AIM. It's also due to increased costs for inpatient psychiatric hospital placements and an increase in operating leases of buildings due to the relocation of programs from the UMC campus into leased properties. And the increase in justice services is primarily due to negotiated salary increases, an increase in facilities and utilities cost, as well as risk insurance rates. Taking a look at our other fund types, capital projects funds that are used for large or long-term projects for buildings and infrastructure. The increase shown there of $46 million is primarily due to the inclusion of capital projects funded with the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. This was funding that was approved by your board during the fiscal year 22-23, after the adoption of the 22-23 budget. We'll also highlight a few other capital projects that are going to be funded with one-time monies later in this presentation. Debt service funds are used for payments for our pension obligation bonds and lease revenue refunding bonds, or LRRB. The decrease shown of $932,000 is due to the payoff of the 2012 lease revenue bonds for the Juvenile Justice Campus and Downtown Energy Project, and that was paid off in 22-23. Enterprise funds provide services to outside users, and users pay the cost of these services on a reimbursement basis. Examples are the American Avenue landfill and various disposal sites, and the $13 million decrease that's shown in appropriations on the chart is primarily due to the substantial progress of the Phase 1 waste relocation project at the American Avenue disposal site. Internal service funds, or ISFs, are similar to enterprise funds in that they provide services on a cost reimbursement as well. However, these services are provided to county departments and to other governmental agencies. The primary increase in the ISFs this year are for insurance costs and risk management and estimated expenditures in fleet services. Special revenues, the last fund type shown on the chart, are for monies that are restricted or committed for specific expenditures or use, and most of that revenue is received from the state and federal government. They are transferred monthly or a quarterly basis to general fund departments based on eligible expenditures, actual expenditures. And much of the increase shown there on the chart for special revenue and trust funds is for human services, as well as an increase in the roads fund due to the Golden State Corridor Improvements Project and other federally funded maintenance projects, as well as a net increase of staffing of 5 positions. Discretionary revenues included in the recommended budget have 2 components, and that's countywide revenues budgeted in Org 0415 and fund balance from the previous fiscal year. Countywide revenues are recommended this year at $354.6 million, which represents a $16.5 million increase from the prior year. The fund balance available for fiscal year fiscal year 22-23 is $92.2 million and is primarily from countywide revenues that exceeded prior year budgeted revenues, as well as prior year net county cost savings from departments. Discretionary revenues fund net county cost, which is the amount needed to cover the shortfall when department appropriations exceed department revenues. Countywide revenues, as shown here, are primarily from property taxes as well as sales tax, with secured property taxes and property taxes in lieu of motor vehicle fees comprising 80%, or $283 million of total countywide revenues. And growth for these revenues is based on assessed value. This graph shows the total available discretionary revenues broken out by service type. Of the total $446.9 million, almost 60% of the funds support justice services. That's total net county cost. Net assessed value, the 23 and 24 preliminary net assessment roll increased approximately $7 billion or 7% over the prior year's roll value. And although this increase is slightly less than last year's increase of $7.6 billion or about 8.5%, it is still well above the average annual increase, which had previously been approximately 5% for the previous years. Although there was substantial growth in net assessed value, the county continues to prepare for the impacts of the cooling housing market and for slowed growth. As in previous years, this year's recommended budget maintains a conservative approach to budgeting countywide revenues impacted by assessed value. And estimates for property tax revenues include only the cost of living increase that's associated with Proposition 13, which is 2%. In light of the current economic uncertainty, taking this conservative approach will allow for future stability and for sustainability. And now Paul will highlight some of the highlights of the budget.
So just want to mention a few high-level things before we get back into the details again. We can go down to the next slide page. So we've mentioned the theme, but just conservative discretionary revenue estimates. And a lot of the things we've been able to achieve in this county with one-time dollars have been because of that approach. But I can also say I was here during some of the downturns when Paige had the slide up a few moments ago that showed property tax growth, and you'll notice during that period of time from 2011 to 2003 or 2013, 14, where it was just flat and our costs continued to go up. At the time, I was in human resources, which means I was the one that had to be involved with our team on some of those difficult decisions of laying off employees. Because of the approach that we're taking, the goal is to ever avoid being in that situation. And so having those conservative estimates assists with that. Your board has made great progress in increasing funding in our general reserves. And this budget continues that strategy that your board began by increasing that from $70 million to $80 million. Paige will speak to the history of that in just a moment. The budget mitigation fund, so this was something that was put aside last year. Last year it was $20 million, this year it's $32 million. And again, the reason for that is we are anticipating unexpected costs, whether that be the increased cost of doing business, whether it be the unknowns that we'll talk about in a moment. The difference between the two, general reserves is something that is only available to use in the case of an emergency. And it takes a 4/5 vote to use that. The budget mitigation is something that can be accessed under other circumstances if needed. I do want to highlight something that helped us this year that will not be there likely in the future, and that is a lot of our salary and benefit cost increases were offset by reduction in retirement rates. And so that really helped us this year to get through, but that is not something we anticipate continuing. And so it may be flat, but then it will begin to increase. And so as we prepare for the future, we need to realize that. So it may have looked better than it was because it offset the salary benefit costs this year. And then I just want to end again with the uncertain economic times ahead. The significantly increased cost of doing business. Paige spoke to some of those things, whether it be with our insurance rates and general liability going up 25% or workers' comp going up 12% or other things that we're seeing in this hardened market. There's other things that we see with revenue growth slowing. We're already seeing that on the sales tax side. We're seeing it not just slow, but decrease. And those are things that will affect us. The unknowns of the federal state budget, we're still watching that carefully. And so all of those things very much could affect us this fiscal year. And so this is a budget that prepares for that, and I think is as ready as it can be under these circumstances. And I'll hand it back over to Paige.
As Paul mentioned, the recommended budget includes fund balance usage for budget mitigation as well as adding $10 million to general reserves. The county's goal is to reach a total fund balance level in the general fund reserve of no less than 1 month of operating expenditures. Over the last few years, we've been able to inch closer to that goal, and as shown with the $10 million recommended $10 million to be recommended in this budget, as shown, the general reserve would be increased to $80 million, still well below the overall general reserve target. The recommended budget also includes one-time funding for various capital projects, a few of which are highlighted here. Additional funding is recommended for the Ag Commissioner Saylor building, as well as for the board CAO Hall of Records project. And a new project recommended this year is for a downtown parking structure to address the county's parking needs. In conclusion, I want to thank you, board, for your consideration of the recommended budget. I'd also like to take the time to say thank you to all of our department heads, our budget and their budget and fiscal staff who worked diligently with our office on this recommended budget. A big thank you to CAO Paul Nerland for his leadership, and as well as the entire CAO staff for the many hours that were dedicated to this budget process, and to, as well as Gosha Trexler, our honorary CAO team member, who filled in for all of the work while I was out on leave. And last but not least, a huge thank you to Greg Ranke, our former assistant CAO, who's here with us today, for all of his guidance and assistance in this budget process. Turn it over to you, Paul.
I want to echo what Paige said and just thank her for all of her work and her leadership and organization in this process. It is a very difficult, long process, and for the departments that submitted to this. Also, just want to say a personal thank you to Greg. Since I've been in the sales office, we've worked very closely together, and your leadership and your background, your history on the fiscal side has been something that was appreciated very much. Greg is soon officially riding off into the sunset, or maybe flying off into the sunset into another state. But Greg, I just want to personally thank you for all you've done for this county and all that you've done for the sales office and this board. And that officially concludes our presentation, and at this point we can entertain any comments or questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions or comments from board members at this time? Supervisor Magzig?
A couple of quick comments. Greg or Paige, can you comment a little bit on sales tax and some of the slowing trends and even negative trends that we're seeing? Has the budget office in Sacramento opined on how negative they think that might go, or are we expecting it to flatten off at some point?
We are expecting it to be reduced. We've seen, in fact, over the last 3 out of the 4 last months that there has been a reduction in sales tax statewide.
And then also, I know that we've seen just unprecedented growth in valuations of properties in Fresno County, and a lot of individuals believe that property taxes are kept wholly by the county. We collect property taxes, but can you just share a little bit about what % of property taxes actually stays at the county, and I think schools receive a lion's share of the property taxes. Special districts get some as well. But generally speaking, kind of what percent do we get to keep?
Greg, is that something you want to address?
I believe it's around 16% of the total amount of property taxes, what we actually receive in Fresno County.
What did you say, Greg?
About 16%,
Oh, it's that high,
yeah.
yeah. Actually, the way that worked, coming out of Prop 13, was the high tax counties, most of them being in the Bay Area, they keep around 20 to 21%. And then some of the rural counties were really low, and they get as low as about 11. That's just kind of a shotgun approach to how that ended up falling.
Thank you.
No other questions or comments from the board. Madam Clerk, item number 2, please.
Item number 2, under General Fund 0001, you have Agriculture Commissioner Sealer of Weights and Measures, Assessor Recorder, Assessor Org 0420, Auditor Controller Treasurer Tax Collector, Behavioral Health Public Guardian, Board of Supervisors, Child Support Services, County Administrative Office, CAO Grants, Alternate Internet Defense, Countywide Revenues, Contingencies, General Revenues, and Designations, Court Ancillary Services, Grand Jury, Interest and Miscellaneous Expenditures, County Clerk Elections, County Council, District Attorney Grants, Human Resources, Internal Services Department, Purchasing, Librarian, Probation Grants, Probation Juvenile Justice Campus, Public Defender, Public Health, County Medical Services, Public Works and Planning, Support Services, Transit Services, Grants, Community Development Block Grant, Parks and Grounds, Sheriff Coroner Public Administrator, Social Services, Aid to Adoptions, Aid to Refugees, CalWorks, Dependent Children Foster Care, General Relief, In-Home Supportive Services, In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority, Veteran Service Office.
Thank you. Are there any board members with comments or concerns with General Fund 0001 budgets? Supervisor Magzik?
Just a general comment. We received our budget books a few weeks ago, which I appreciate getting those in advance. And I just want to thank your office as well as those department heads that I had an opportunity to have conversations with about the budget as it's been presented. So again, really appreciate the extra time that we were given to review the budget this year.
Supervisor Brandow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul, about 6 weeks ago, maybe 3 board meetings ago, or maybe 4, I asked about positions. And so we budget for positions, right? And you said this year we're only adding 12 new positions. And then what happens, so help me understand, in our method, what happens if that position goes unfilled? And say, let's just choose one position and it pays $75,000. But we don't get any applications. What happens with that position? Does it get rolled over?
It does. So today, the county has about a 15% vacancy rate. And so in each department, as we end the year, if they did not expend those funds, those dollars are part of what rolls over to the next year. But
For the same thing?
Yes.
For the same position for the?
No, when I say rollover, I mean it goes to, those are some of the fund balance. So some of those one-time funds where this is money that's net county cost that wasn't expended, then that is part of the one-time dollars that can
So
be
does
used.
it stay in that?
It's rebudgeted. So when we come back.
Rebudgeted, so it gets pulled back?
Yep.
And rebudgeted, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So a couple of board meetings ago, I asked, and you know, by the way, you said that this was already a desire that you had, but, so we have these, say a department, because here's what I hear, is that sometimes we're having a hard time filling positions, right? And it's not just unique to Fresno County, but just tough time to be hiring folks. So, say we have 10 positions and they're all budgeted for $75,000, but really, the public says that job's worth $100,000. $75,000, I'm not gonna leave my job to go do that. So we have these 10 spots budgeted, but nobody takes us up on those 10. And then I suggested, well, why don't we just wipe those 10 clear and come back with 4 spots that pay $100,000 where we can actually get a body into that position. Talk to me about that. Is that reflected at all in this budget strategically, or I know you're working on that?
Well, yes. So, as you know, I mean, first of all, your board has done a lot this year to raise salaries for positions that we couldn't fill. But I guess philosophically, if I restate what you're saying, and I agree 100%, I would rather have fewer competitively paid positions than more positions that we can't fill that aren't paid as competitively as they should. In looking at that with departments, we would ensure that the service level needed in their department would still be met if we needed to cut positions to help fund that. Obviously, the funding source in some departments varies, but that is a strategy available to us. No secret to department heads, they've heard me say that before. So I appreciate you saying that, because if that's needed, that to me is a better strategy than we've taken in the past.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That pretty much answers my question.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, is there any comments from the public? Madam Clerk, item number 3, please.
We now move to item number 3, Capital Projects Fund 0400, Juvenile Justice Campus, West Annex Jail, Jail Improvements, Sheriff's Area 2 Substation, Animal Control Facility, Agriculture Capital Projects, Hall of Records Improvements, Clovis Library, Reedley Branch Library, Parks, Elkhorn Training Facility, ARPA projects.
No presentation. Any board members that have any questions, comments, or concerns about the capital projects fund budget? Supervisor Magzik.
Quick comments. I know Area 2 substation has been delayed a little bit, so hopefully, is there an expectation that the revenues that are in this budget will be able to complete that this upcoming fiscal year? That's my first question.
Yes.
Second question is Clovis Library. We've been putting money aside for the library, and I know that there have been some negotiations back and forth between the city and the county. Does it look like this fiscal year we'll be able to actually have shovels in the ground for that library project?
The answer is yes. And so we made significant progress there and can't wait to get started on that project.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any comments from the public regarding the Budget's Enterprise Fund? Okay. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, item 4.
Item number 4, Debt Service Fund, Debt Service.
Okay. Any board members? Supervisor Magzik.
It was good to see roughly $1 million roll off of debt service payments. I think some of the bigger debt service payments will be rolling off in 2032, 33, and 34. So are we still on track to roll a lot of those off, and is there any expectation that the county is going to be issuing any new debt?
As of now, no. And I think because of the one-time funding we've been able to use for capital projects, there's no anticipation of that today.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, are there any comments from the public? Okay. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item number 5, Internal Service Funds, Human Resources, Fund 1060, Risk Management, Internal Services Department, Fund 1000, Fleet Services, Fund 1020, Information Technology Services, Fund 1030, PeopleSoft Operations, Fund 1035, Security Services, Fund 1045, Facility Services.
Okay. Comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, any comments, questions from the public? Okay. Seeing none, we move on to item number 5.
Item number 6,
6.
Enterprise Funds, Public Works and Planning Fund 0701 Resources, Disposal Sites orgs 9020, 9026, 9028, and 9905. Public Works and Planning Fund 0801 Special Districts Administration.
Questions or comments from the board and enterprise funds? Supervisor Magzik?
Yeah, just real quick, with special districts, I know that a lot of the special districts that we have throughout the county, where our treasury pool holds a lot of the revenues that they have, I have general concerns overall about, cemetery districts, other special districts where the county has some oversight. So I'd love to see a plan put together so some of these special districts can be self-sustaining, fully self-sustaining into the future.
Thank you, Supervisor Magzeg. I couldn't agree more, and we could certainly come back with more ideas about what that plan would look like.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, any comments from the public? We now will take up the budgets under special revenue and trust funds.
Item number 7, Special Revenue Trust Funds, Assessor Recorder, Recorder Org 1048, County Administrative Office, Local Revenue Fund 2011-2011 Realignment, Library Org 7511, Library Grants, Library Book Fund, Library Capital Improvements, Public Health, Emergency Medical Services, Public Works and Planning, Road Fund, Public Works and Planning Fish and Game Propagation, Public Works and Planning Off-Highway License, Special Revenue Trust Funds with limited appropriations, Special Revenue Trust Funds with no appropriations.
Any comments from the board? Supervisor Magzig? None? Okay, seeing none others, are there any comments from the public? Okay. Madam Clerk, item number 8, please.
Item number 8, adopt the fiscal year 23-24 final budget resolution, which includes all adjustments to appropriations, revenues, and obligated fund balances made to the recommended budget during the budget hearing.
Are there any board members who have comments or questions from fiscal year 23-24 budget resolution? None? Supervisor
Mr. Chairman,
Randall?
thank you. Paul, I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, but I think we're getting close to voting on this. So you and I have been talking for the last couple of weeks, probably a month or 5 weeks or so, about a need for spay-neuter program inside Fresno County. I visited our new animal shelter, which is beautiful, by the way, and talked with the staff there, included you in some conversations, and there's a proposal for some additional spay and neuter plan that could help Fresno County get a better grip on what's going on in the animal population, and I'm going to ask you to describe the pilot program that you've come up with, and I would be interested in if we could support this pilot program. But it wasn't listed in here anywhere because it just kind of came up in the last probably 5 or 6 weeks. But
Thank you, Supervisor Brandale. So looking at a couple things, our brand-new animal services facility is beautiful, but it is full already. And we're finding that the need is still there, and so having a spay-neuter program that actually gets to the root of the problem is what we really need to be focusing in on. The proposal that we've looked at is a pilot program. It's about $500,000 program. With that, it would be over about 4 months, and it would focus on about 4,800 cats and 1,600 dogs that would be spayed and neutered at our own facility. In looking at this and looking at our budget and where we may have room for this, there is sufficient appropriations within our interest and miscellaneous account, where what we could do with direction from your board is return at a later date with a contract that would work on these services. I think it's a good idea. It's a pilot program that we could come back and report the outcome to your board, but it's a proactive approach. We would then bring a budget resolution at that time so that it's moving those funds, but I would take it as direction to staff today rather than a motion to change the budget today.
okay, so I don't have to make a budget motion that includes this pilot program at this time. We basically be giving direction to you to come back to us with that.
And that would allow us to then work with them, come back with a contract, and then at that time bring a budget, appropriate the funds specifically in that item at a later date.
Okay. So that would be something I would support. when you go out and visit our shelter, you can almost with your own eyes see immediately how impacted it is by the overwhelming. One time I went out in the late summer, and the kittens just start pouring in that place. It's crazy. So I think we really need this. We've had meetings with even all the way up to public health, who oversees this stuff, and they all feel the need for it. Isn't that correct?
They do. I mean, it's a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach. And again, I like the idea of a pilot program that actually comes back with what was the result of this, and are we seeing a difference?
Anyway,
I'm okay with that, bringing an item back.
Wanted to thank you, CAO, for your presentation, and Paige as well, but also wanted to just kind of piggyback a little bit on some of your comments that you made. Wanted to thank all the departments for the great work that they've done this past year, working with the funding that they received. They've always seemed to step up, and I know that the requests that they receive from the board, they do their best to respond and take care of whatever situation there may be. Also, the partnerships that of the different organizations that have stepped up to help. We had some concerns earlier this year about the Liberty Cemetery, and one of the first calls I received was from the member of the board of directors of the Armenian Cemetery, and said, "We're right next door. We'll be willing to help and work with Public Works, and let's try to get everything as best we can get it. The veterans deserve more, and I want to thank them and the Public Works for working with them. Also, we received calls about moving the Tower Library into the Tower District. The area that the current one is in is not good, and I've had some conversations with Ramon and some of the folks that are asking for this library to be in the tower, and I shared with them how we have priority list, but anything's possible with an existing building that might be there that we can utilize. So I'm working with him on that. But I want to thank the staff, overall staff on the departments. They've done a great job with what they've been given to work with, money-wise and staff-wise. So thank you. It was a very good presentations. And with that, I'll entertain a motion in a second. I'm sorry, I didn't ask for comments from the public relating to the fiscal year budget. Is there any comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion in a second to approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 final budget resolution.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
We now close the fiscal year 23-24 budget hearings, and we now move to public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on this agenda.
Moving to public presentations, just a reminder, we're limited to 3 minutes per person and no more than 15 minutes total per topic. Okay, any comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, meeting is adjourned, and I'll entertain a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.